Hey everybody, Jeff here. So, listening to our podcast, you may be under the impression that jRPGs are my one true video game love. And while I really do enjoy the jRPG genre, especially because of this podcast where I get to play these games and talk about them with my friends and joke around, have a good time, jRPGs were not my first video game love. My first video game love has always been point-and-click adventure games. Now, this is a genre that hasn't been big in a long time, so I wouldn't blame a lot of listeners if they didn't really know what that genre is. For those of you who are listening, think Sierra or LucasArts. We're talking King's Quest, Space Quest, Monkey Island, Full Throttle, Grim Fandango. These are the sorts of things that we're talking about. They are generally plot and puzzle driven, right? You go into a room, you pick up everything that isn't nailed down, you try every item on everything to solve puzzles, and then you move into the next room. That's essentially what these games are. And I absolutely love them. They were the dominant PC genre of game when they came out. They have been supplanted first by first-person shooters, then RPGs, and so on and so on. The main problem that they have, and one of the reasons they're not so popular anymore, is they do lack a lot of replayability. Because once you know the solutions to the puzzles, going through the game is super easy. I just recently replayed a couple of the Leisure Suit Larry games, and I know them well enough that the entire game took me like 2-3 hours, and I was taking my time to smell the roses, so to speak, look at everything, talk to everyone. But it still goes by super quick, and since even though I haven't played it in at least 10 years, I know how to beat the game. So that's one of the reasons I think they're not as popular as they used to be, but I still would like to talk about them. So it's just you and me here. There's no Russ, there's no anybody else. I thought what I might do is spend a couple of episodes talking about series of adventure games that I love, and possibly I could play some that I've never played before, and I could talk about those with you in future episodes. Today, for our first episode, I want to talk about what I think is probably the best series of adventure games that has been made. It doesn't mean that it includes my favorite adventure game, but I think it is the strongest, most engaging, and most replayable series of adventure games that exists. And it's funny that I'm picking this one because it has heavy RPG elements. So think of this as me encouraging you to dip your toe out of the jRPG pool, but not entirely out of the pool. I want to talk today about the Quest for Glory series from Sierra. Quest for Glory was a series of adventure RPG hybrid games. One of the coolest things about this game at the time, it's still relatively unknown, although we can all point out times where we've seen it. When you beat a game in the Quest for Glory series, you get to save your character. Now, these games are old enough that the game assumes you're going to save it to a floppy disk on the A drive. That's how old these games are. But you save your character, and then when the next game comes out, you load your character into the next game, and it has all the same stats, and it remembers your class. This was unheard of at the time, and it's still pretty rare today. Mass Effect does this. The Trails games sort of do it, but they don't fully capture your stats. If your stats are within this range, you get loaded into this range. But let's start talking about Quest for Glory 1. So you want to be a hero. Quest for Glory 1 is set in kind of a Germanic fantasy setting. You play a hero new to town, and you are there to be a hero. You have completed your hero's correspondence course through the mail, and you're ready for your real first adventure. So you come to this small Germanic mountain town to solve their problems. I mentioned classes earlier. In the first game, you get to pick from one of 3 classes. You get to be a fighter, a magic user, or a thief. They're not playing around. They don't call it a rogue. You're a thief. And what this means is every puzzle in the game actually has at least 3 different types of solutions. The easiest way to think of it is your character encounters a locked door. The thief is going to pick the lock. If you're playing the magic user, you're going to cast open. And if you're a fighter, you're going to kick it down. Right? That is the bare bones version of how you can deal with these. You can also multi-class. You can make yourself a thief who can cast magic. But you have a certain number of stat points when you're creating your character, and the more you multi-class, kind of the less good you're going to be overall. But you can grind your stats up. An early example is outside of the healer's hut. She's lost her wedding ring, and if you talk to her enough, you start to get the feeling that her pet pterosaur stole her wedding ring to give it to a female pterosaur in a tree outside. And you can prove this by climbing the tree, going out to the nest. There's the ring. Get the ring, give it to the healer, you get some potions, everybody's happy. But your character is not good enough at climbing to climb that tree on the first time. So you're going to climb tree, climb tree, climb tree, climb tree. And every time you try, your climb stat's going to go up a little bit. You're probably going to get exhausted. You'll need to take a rest somewhere or do something else and come back. But eventually, your stat will be high enough that you can climb the tree. And you can go out and you can get the ring. That's a lot of how this game functions. There are puzzles and inventory, but you also have to be aware of your stats, what you're good at and what you need to grind. And your classes determine different things that you need to focus on. I will also say, as we talk about the Sierra games, because the Sierra ones are the ones I know the most backwards and forwards, the first game of each Sierra mainline franchise, almost all have had remakes, right? When the games, all of these games first started, for the most part, it was typing in an interface. You type the commands that you want your character to do. Hopefully you know the right words for the right commands. During the remake, it goes to a mouse interface where, the right mouse button cycles through, I want the eyeball, and then the left mouse button, you click, and it looks at a thing. Well, now I want to talk to it. Right mouse button a couple of times, click the mouse, talk. Either version of this first game, I think, is fine. The typed or the mouse-driven interface are both great. It's a fun game. Ultimately, you come to this town, and Baba Yaga has cursed the Baron of this kingdom, or this town, or this area. His son has disappeared, then his daughter disappeared, and there are brigands that are choking off access to the land, and it's your job to fix all of this. So you have to find the son, and you can accidentally kill the son if you don't realize that he has been magically transformed into a bear. You have to find the daughter, Elsa. She's been transformed into the leader of the brigands, and she's a swordsman. And if you try to fight her, she will end you. And then you got to chase off Baba Yaga. And that ends the game. Actually, once you chase off Baba Yaga, the game's over. You can beat the game without finding the son. Possibly even without finding Elsa. So you get replayability in the different classes and finding all of the puzzles. Another thing a lot of these adventure games, especially the Sierra games, did was points to try and encourage replayability. You get points for things. And trying to get max points on a game gives you a reason to go in and try it again and again and again because, look at this. If I look in this log, that's +1 point. Something like, if you're playing as the fighter, you get points for killing one of each beast in the game. If you're not playing a fighter, you can play through the entire game skipping all combat. Actually, you don't have to be in a fight until the third game. There's 1 or 2 fights you have to do. And then after that, fighting becomes somewhat more normal. But I do like having those options. Anyway. Every game in the series has an NPC that will hint or reference the next game in the series, and that will mention the town of Silmaria, which is where the last game of the series is, because This whole series was planned out by Lori and Corey Cole, a married couple. They had a plan for a 4-game arc, and they mapped it all out ahead of time. Now, as they started developing it, they realized, ooh, actually, we need another game there in the middle. So it is 5 games. But it is really kind of cool to see how cohesive the universe is when you can catch people talking about Silmaria, and you know Silmaria is coming, and you can find characters talking about the next game. Speaking of the next game, Quest for Glory 2, Trial by Fire, might be my favorite game in the series. Now, it is a typing interface, but there is a fan remake that turns it into a mouse-driven interface, and honestly, the fan remake is great, and it still works with importing and exporting characters. I highly recommend it. When I play through the series, I play the fan remake because it's very good. Essentially, your hero in the first game befriended a couple of cat people who run a tavern, and after you save the kingdom, they're like, hey, our land is in trouble too. Why don't you hop on our flying carpet, come with us, and save our land? And as a hero, you do. You're now the hero of Spielberg, so you're off to Shapir to save Shapir, which is basically it's Middle Eastern. Right? It's Arabian. So you go to this new town. Navigating around the town is quite the puzzle because it's a labyrinth. You're meant to use maps that came with the game to help you find your way around. The game adds a new ability called communication. Grinding up your communication basically lets you haggle for better prices on things, which is great. It also introduces a hidden honor mechanic because by the end of the second game, you have the ability, if you took honorable actions all the way throughout, of becoming a paladin, which then unlocks the 4th class in the series for you to import your character as in future editions. Paladins are only available if you import a character. Now, starting with, I think the 4th game, the game came with a free importable character so you could play Paladin. Also, if you didn't unlock Paladin legitimately, when you load your character into a new game, you have the ability to adjust stats, and you have the ability to confirm your class, and you can cheat and just say, I was a Paladin. I should also point out, in the first game, 100 is the max level for all your skills. In the second game, they can go up to 200. In the third game, 300, and so on. And it becomes very easy for your character to fall behind by the 3rd or 4th game because I haven't used that skill that much and it's still only at 70. And now 70 is pathetic. The game does boost your attributes up as you import your character. It does boost them to a baseline so you don't fall too far behind. So the thief is not going to become a paladin because if you break into any houses, which is a big fun thing to do with the thief, is break into houses, steal a bunch of stuff, and fence it. That's not honorable. It's very hard for a thief to become a paladin. Basically, you have to skip having fun as a thief for a thief to become a paladin. A magic user in the second game has the ability to undergo trials to become a wizard. And typically it's going to be a fighter character who can choose to become a paladin. That's just because the paladin is a sword and shield bearer. His honor points give him special abilities, but he's basically fighter plus. So in the second game, you have to fight elemental monsters, and eventually you find the person behind all of the evil is this wizard named Adavis, who hypnotizes you and makes you go through and he was stirring up trouble so he could find a hero to fulfill a prophecy so that he could conquer the world. And of course you stop him. Along the way, you meet a paladin named Rakesh, and he's a lion tar. We had some centaurs in the first game, now we have a lion tar. At the end of the second game, you are adopted by the Sultan of Shapir. You are now Prince of Shapir. And the third game is you going to Rakesh's homeland, which is a very African-themed land, to help them with problems they've got there. War is brewing, and they need a hero to bring peace. The third game is probably the weakest in this series. There's not as much for a thief to do. there's not as much for a wizard to do, although he does get one wizardly combat in, which is kind of fun. It is the weaker game, but it is also the first mouse-driven game. It's still a good story. It's still, the entire series has a sense of whimsy to it. If the idea of doing an adventurer's correspondence course didn't teach you that, there is a sense of humor underlying all of the drama and action and adventure, which I always love when my games have a sense of humor. So, third game, you find what's causing strife in the land and you bring about peace. Congratulations, hero. When suddenly you are overtaken by foul magic and you wake up in possibly the best game in the series. For me, it's a real toss-up between 2 and 4. Quest for Glory 4, Shadows of Darkness. The only reason I don't immediately jump up and say that 4 is the best one is because its tone is very different from the rest of the series, right? The series is light, fun, it's got drama, it's got action, but it's silly and goofy and light and fun. The fourth game is much darker in tone. There's still comedy. But in the fourth game, you are in basically a version of Russia, and you're dealing with Cthulhu-like evil. Lovecraftian evil, I should say. So you're trapped in this country. You have to find out how you were brought here. There's vampires in the castle. There's great evil trying to awaken a mindless horror from beyond this reality. One thing that's interesting is, in the previous games, each game has a reference to a powerful sorceress named Irana. You don't know much about Irana other than you find evidence of her magic and it was powerful. She creates peaceful areas where, like, lions and deer hang out together, or where you can sleep in a field of flowers and without worrying about monsters coming up on you. In the fourth game, you learn that Irana died fighting this evil, and it's up to you to finish the fight for her. It is a very, very good game. You're encountering Rusalkis and Leshies. It's a great game to be a paladin in. There's extra quests that only a paladin can do that are a lot of fun. There's some fun characters. There's a thieves guild that you can find. Although there's only one break-in house in the game, and I feel bad doing it every time because I like the guy that you're stealing from. So it's a darker game. Also of interesting note, by 4, they have voice acting. And the narrator of 4 is John Rhys Davies, which is just very cool. So, you beat 4. And you defeat the evil, which lifts the thing that is blocking the spell, because your wizard friend from the first game has been trying to find you, and once you defeat evil, he can find you, and he teleports you to Samaria for the 5th game. The 5th game is an odd duck, because they went full 3D. There's a lot to like about the 5th game from a story perspective. Gameplay-wise, it's a little weird. Combat is no longer, you encountered an enemy and now you go into a combat screen and you deal with our unique combat mechanics. No, it's a little more action oriented in that you run around and you cast fling spells or throw daggers or attack with your sword, all on the same screen. The idea of 5 is the king has been assassinated without an heir, and the kingdom of Samaria is looking for a new king, and so they do these trials. And whoever wins the trials gets to become king. You can already see where this is going. Now, it turns out, while the trials are happening, somebody is secretly trying to undo a magical binding and free a terrible dragon who will destroy the entire kingdom. So, on the one hand, you're trying to become king. On the other hand, you're trying to find out who's killing people and trying to unlock this dragon. What I like about 5 a lot is it ties up the series so well. There are characters from every entry in the series, and it feels like old friends, which is good because they're supposed to be. Elsa is back. You can meet Irana. Rakesh is back from the 2nd and 3rd game. Erasmus the Wizard and his talking rat are back from the 1st game. these elements are really cool. There's other minor characters. There's no point in saying you meet them because I haven't addressed them, but all sorts of minor characters. You have the option of getting married. There are 4 romanceable women. Each one is really strongly intended to be for a specific class. And some of them won't be with some classes. Irana, who you can bring back from the dead, is not going to marry a thief. She's really meant for a paladin. Katrina, the evil sorceress from the 4th game, you can bring her back to life as not an evil sorceress vampire, and she's for a magic user or a wizard. I meant to mention Adavis comes back as the big bad of the 4th one, which is just cool. Most of these adventure games don't have a strong through story. It's very episodic, and Quest for Glory has this strong, cohesive narrative, which is great. Anyway, by the end of 5, you have the choice. You can become the king, or choose to abdicate the throne. You could become the chief of thieves in this city, or not. But that is the end of your adventure, because there is no Quest for Glory 6. Interestingly, though, there is one character, a merchant, a dog person, who talks about his homeland and the troubles there in such a way that, like, I think they were planning for a 6th game to go there. But this is around the time that Sierra shut down. There are parts of 5 that feel unfinished. There's a ghost in the inn that you can't really interact with, but if you click on him, it's bugged and it raises your honor. There was talk about DLC for the first time in one of these adventure games where you would meet Punny Bones, the comedic jester from the 4th game. So the game does feel a little unfinished, which is one of the things that irritates me. It hints at possibly solutions to puzzles that aren't in the game. So the 5th is a little bit of a letdown, but narratively it is great, and it does tie the story together, which is very enjoyable. I highly recommend these games. You can go to Good Old Games and get a pack of them, and they're great. I remember actually when I played 5 Dragonfire, when it initially came out, they had a multiplayer demo mode where you could play as some player characters. That obviously never ended up happening because, like so many other things, this game just like, we're done, that's all we can do, at least it's playable. But it also had, if you didn't have QuickTime installed on your computer, the game wouldn't tell you definitely need to have QuickTime, but it would crash during a climactic moment of the game if you didn't have QuickTime installed, because it would try to go to a video and the game would just crash, and it took me forever to figure out why my game was crashing. I highly recommend playing Quest for Glory. As for now, the creators of Quest for Glory did kickstart a new game like 8-9 years ago, around the time I was actually working on a Leisure Suit Larry game. It's called Hero U Rogue to Redemption, where you play a rogue at an adventuring academy. I haven't played a lot of Rogue to Redemption, but it is my understanding that it does take place in the Quest for Glory universe, so I definitely plan to play it at some point. I just haven't gotten around to it. So that's it. Just a quick rundown of, I think, one of the best adventure game series out there, Quest for Glory. Highly recommend it. It's great because you can play through the entire series at least 3 times and have 3 very different experiences. The differences between a fighter and a paladin aren't significant. A paladin gets more content. I don't know why you would do a straight fighter playthrough and choose not to be a paladin. But there are at least 3 playthroughs of this game where you get to see different content and different characters and use different abilities and different puzzles in different ways, which is great. Anyway, that's it for this first episode of Jeff's Adventure Academy. I'll see you guys next time.